Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ethical Consumer Podcast. I'm your host, Julia, and joining me today are Empower Coffee Roasters founders, Denise and Zach. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Most definitely. So I think this is the third time we've had a duo call on the podcast, which is always kind of exciting because there's two different backgrounds, two different viewpoints. And when you get to work in an operation that you have multiple individuals involved, I think it's just so much fun because you get to have double the input, double the information, double the background, and like half the workload, hopefully. So we'll discuss how you guys work together a little bit later. But first, the hardest question. What are your favorite foods? Whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I'll go first. So I grew up in a very Italian family. So grew up with Italian food, and my absolute favorite food for my entire life, from when I was little to now, is eggplant parm. But just my mom's eggplant parm. It is the best, like cut nice and thin, fried perfectly, very light on the cheese, and it's just perfection.
That sounds delicious to me. So eggplant parm, usually the Italians like their meat as well, but in an appropriate amount, not like Americans, I would say. Did you are you a vegetarian as well? Is eggplant your jam in general, or did you fancy the let's see, what's the dish? The bolognese and things like that with meat as well when you were younger?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, right now I am a vegetarian, but I did grow up with all of the, like you said, the bolognese, the meatballs, and the Italian sausages and everything. And I always preferred the eggplant to the meats. So it's just been my go-to. And there is something about a bolognese that is like, just like the texture is pretty nice. So if I do that now, I usually use like some kind of Beyond Meat or Impossible Meat to just get like that little bit of texture and flavor into a nice sauce.
Sure, I hear you on that. And I would agree, the eggplant parm has been probably just a standard favorite, but then yes, add the extra proteiny texture is necessary for the bolognese.
Exactly.
Zach, how about you? What's your favorite?
Oh, yeah, I have a very sophisticated palate, so I would say that my favorite food is the first bite of a Big Mac. And then right after that first bite, so the second through the last is not that great. So it's just, yeah, but aside from that, I would say I kind of like barbecue a lot. Just all,
Sure.
The brisket, the pulled pork, all the sides. Yeah, I would say that's my jam.
Nice. I have to combine your two favorites. So my fiance and I don't eat a lot of meat at home. When we do, we like to make sure we can get it somewhat local, good quality and such. So we don't usually do the McDonald's Big Mac, but I will take the crumbles, the fake meat crumbles from Aldi, which we've also used in a bolognese here, and make a Big Mac salad, Big Mac-esque salad. It's really good. It's probably the Thousand Island. I think you can put Thousand Island with anything and make it super bomb.
Thousand Island is the key. I mean, obviously, your Big Mac meat is probably not really meat, and
Yes.
everything else is just vegetables. So it's really the Thousand Island is purely what it is.
It's the crunchy iceberg and the Thousand Island that does it. I love it. Two varied answers, and yet both I would be totally down for. I love it. So about Empower Coffee Roasters. Denise, this, from what I've gleaned and just talking to you before, this is kind of your passion project, and your background with math and science kind of led you to want to start this business, want to start this roastery, but specifically to be able to give back in the STEM areas. Denise, would you tell me a little bit about your upbringing, your academia, and what you do that made you so passionate about this?
Sure. Yeah. So I had several, I guess, educational and career pivots throughout my life so far, which for me is really important because I get really restless if I'm doing the same thing for too long, and I start to get bored and I need a change and I need something else. So I started out, probably throughout high school, I just really loved science, especially chemistry. It just really clicked with me, like just to be able to see and feel things. And have equations and concepts that explain the world around us. And that just, it really vibed with me a lot. So I went into college back in New York City, studying chemistry at Barnard College. It was an amazing experience. And then right after that, I found a job with the NYPD doing forensic analysis and forensic chemistry. So that was a really cool experience. I was there for about 4 years. But again, I did start to get a little bit bored after a while and a little bit restless. And I realized that I didn't want to just like do forensic analysis, but I wanted to do a little bit more research and experimentation. And the type of work that I did at the NYPD in using different kinds of analytical instruments made me just really want to know about analytics more. So at that point, we moved to Arizona. That was back in 2012. We moved to Phoenix. I started a PhD program in analytical chemistry at Arizona State, and I was there for about 6 years. And it was really during that time that I started to teach general chemistry labs at ASU to freshmen and to teach like some other courses around the campus. And I started to volunteer with some local organizations and nonprofits around the area. I did some volunteer work at the Arizona Science Center, worked with an organization called Hands-On Greater Phoenix to do some like STEM and science experiments with kids that were living in shelters. And it was really an amazing experience to work with kids and to see how just curious and brilliant they are and how experimental they are. And it brought me back to when I was a kid too, when I wanted to just play with things and try like, what if I tried this, or what if I tried this? And to really facilitate that was such an enriching experience. So from those experiences, I realized I want to do more. And this is just what really makes my heart happy, and what makes me thrilled is to like help kids realize their potential and to realize that they can do whatever they want. And a lot of what I saw in my experiences was that some girls don't have the, I guess, background in STEM or the exposure to STEM that would make them want to pursue a career in STEM. So that's where my passion came from, that I wanted to do something where I could help girls really explore whatever they want, so that if they wanted to have a career in tech or in coding or in biology, that like they have the background to do that and they have the experience to do that. And that's where my passion came from.
I love that. So you bounced around. Let's see, did you grow up in New York?
I grew up in New York,
Okay.
in Queens.
Okay.
So just a 15-minute subway ride right into the city. So I essentially grew up in New York City. Like still like going to Central Park feels like home.
Oh, I love that. I've been in New York City twice, and both times it was freezing. I don't know why. Both times happened in January and March. So like I've been to Central Park. I'm not going to say that I got to enjoy it that much because it was really cold, but I would like to go back in the summer and see our friend Emily. She's been there for several years now. And so far, I've loved the city. I loved what I've seen. We've done more stuff indoors than we have outdoors, but eventually, hopefully, make it back to Central Park. So I'll hit you up for your recommendations when we go back. Now, Zach, how about you?
Also, born and raised in New York. I was born in Queens also, but, we moved when I was really young. So I moved to a suburb of the city. And it's actually funny because in New York, like every region kind of has its own personality. Like, if someone's from Long Island, if they're from Brooklyn or Staten Island. I grew up in a county called Rockland County. We have no discernible personality. There's nothing about it. So no one knows where I would, if I said I grew up in Rockland, that would make no difference to them.
You get to be anonymous, though. Like, that's not a bad thing sometimes. You don't have the stereotypes that goes with the rest of the boroughs.
Yeah, exactly. So, I went to school up in upstate New York, in Binghamton, which was a great school, but the area was rather depressing because it's like a rust belt where it's always gray and cold. And I did political science, and it was kind of like that's what I was going to do. I was always interested in politics. My grandpa and I would always listen to like talk radio. Although, obviously it was a little bit more conservative than I would wind up being. But, it was still an exposure to politics. And yes, I graduated, and eventually I found a job working for a state senator in New York City. And to this day, she is the greatest, like, elected official I'll ever know. Someone who truly cares. So that was a great experience. I was helping people. A lot of times people don't realize that most of what elected official offices do at kind of the local and state level is actually constituent services. So I kind of cut my teeth helping people get unemployment benefits. If they had issues with the government agency or just getting benefits they were entitled to, that was what I did, was trying to help them navigate the system. And, if they were getting, risk of getting evicted in New York City, that's always a huge issue, especially for older people. That's what we did a lot, and that was great. But, eventually you kind of outgrow your role, and, you have to figure out what your next step is for your career. And in politics, that can go a few different ways. Maybe you get to become chief of staff for an elected official. Maybe you go work for an executive agency as a policy analyst, which is kind of what I was thinking about doing. But we eventually decided to move to Arizona, obviously for Denises school, and I figured I could, keep my career going there because Phoenix is a state capital. So I figured I can get a lot of good work working for the legislature there. Turned out that wasn't actually the case because unlike in New York where you have large staffs of people, in Arizona, an elected official maybe has one person on their staff and that's it. So I was realizing, okay, my desire to maybe help people within politics wasn't quite panning out how I thought. And I guess at the time, fortuitously, I got a job offer at a company. It was, working kind of on the private sector side of politics. So I was working in government relations doing that. And I believed in what our company was doing, so that was great. But I decided also that if I really wanted to get back to my roots of trying to help people, that I kind of enjoyed a lot about my first early years working in politics, that I needed to do something kind of more hands-on. And then when Denise and I were starting to talk about opening up a business, and she was talking about how much she wanted to help young girls and get engaged, I realized this was actually a great way to be more direct with how we can improve people's lives. And I could still use my skills I developed in politics to actually help girls and young women kind of get ahead. So I think it was pleasantly surprised at how my background has kind of helped us in our current mission.
Sure. So your background's really, you ended up doing a lot of work for other people. Denise, like you said, being an educator, but also realizing that there was a lack in exposure for young girls that maybe wanted to go into a STEM type of job or career, but just didn't get to have the exposure. So maybe that opportunity was lost. And then Zach working on more the constituent side in New York and kind of on the other side of things in Arizona, your mission with Empower Coffee Roasters really shines through because you've used this business as a vehicle to keep doing what you are doing in your current careers in a different way, in a more hands-on way, where you get to maybe see the direct effects or know that you're having a broader impact. I don't know if you work with several local places that we'll talk about later, but that has to feel so good to be able to merge passions and at the same time continue what you've been doing for the past, some odd years of your career. So why coffee? How did you decide on coffee roasting?
Yeah,
that's your story.
Yeah, I guess it's more of my story. So again, when I was working in New York, I would have to commute into the city because I was living with my parents up in boring old Rockland County, and they would they got into work really early, so I'd have to start drinking coffee just to function because it was just so early that I was getting up. And at first, you're drinking your typical supermarket or Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks coffee, and loading it up with milk and sugar just to be able to drink it. And I don't know if I was actually in Arizona at the time, if I was still in New York, but I was turned on to this local coffee place, this roastery. I don't know how I found out about them, but I decided to give them a try instead of the normal stuff. And I was kind of blown away by how it tasted, and actually it tasted good. I didn't need milk and sugar. It was amazing. So kind of when you find something new, you either for me it was just diving right into it, getting a little bit obsessed about it. And I started trying coffee from all different roasters across the country. I think you actually, Denise got me a subscription to coffee, like different coffee of the
cool.
month. And so from there, you're not just drinking early coffee. Now you have to improve the way you brew your coffee. So you start getting all the different equipment to brew coffee. We now have, I think, probably 10 different ways of brewing coffee in our home, which is ridiculous. It's way too much for anyone to possibly need.
I think we have 6, so like we're not up to your level, but we're getting there. We are looking at and acquiring more. It seems like every quarter or so there's a new coffee apparatus. So I feel you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. It's great to be heard that way. So anyway, we then discovered that you could actually roast coffee at home. I knew nothing about roasting coffee, but someone telling me that you can throw raw coffee beans in a popcorn popper and get good coffee seemed kind of crazy to me. And so eventually we graduated to roasting coffee at home because, it's cheaper, obviously, to get the raw coffee and do it yourself. And you get, now I guess, fresher coffee because it's ready right there. And it's fun. It was fun to do. And Denise started getting into it too. And it was a hobby that we were both enjoying and having a lot of fun doing. We started giving it as gifts for like the holidays to all of our family and friends because it's much cheaper for us to do that than actually getting gifts.
Sure.
And it was from the heart, so to speak. And then people really liked it, and I think we realized, at the time, that this is maybe something we can do as a business. The barriers to entry really weren't that steep, so we really were starting to think about it, getting closer and closer to actually launching a business and doing this. And I think it was when we were in the garage one day and roasting coffee and it caught on fire for the second time.
Oh no.
That we realized minor fire.
Easily controllable.
Oh good.
But it was at that moment they're like, all right, it's time to do this because we need to still have coffee for ourselves, and the timing just made a lot of sense. So I think we sold our house and used the proceeds to open up the roastery.
Holy cow. Okay, so you're living in a house, I'm assuming, as I see like a closet behind you. So you bought a new house, I'm going to hope? Or
we did some apartment living. After I finished up the PhD at ASU, I went straight into an MBA program because that was at the point where we said we want to start this business, and I know nothing. I spent my entire life in STEM and in science. I knew nothing about starting a business, about accounting and finances and marketing. So the pivot into the MBA program was just like the next reasonable step for me. And while I was in the program, we just moved closer to campus and got a little apartment nearby so that we could keep our expenses low while we did the work of starting our business. And just a few months ago, we moved out of, the middle of the student center and moved farther out into Chandler in Arizona to a house.
Yeah.
Yay. So you're not living in your roastery. You did not sell the house, but get a roasting facility, and you're sleeping underneath the stainless steel tables or anything like that. We're all good. That's a good thing. My goodness. So I'm assuming that you're no longer using a popcorn popper to roast your coffee. How was that learning curve of getting a machine, or did you go through a couple different machines to figure out what you wanted or what worked? Denise, having maybe the science background, did you do much engineering at all, or more like you said chemistry? So I'm assuming not as much engineering.
Well, there's a little bit in there, and that's actually how I really got excited about roasting, because we pretty quickly pivoted toward, and that's the one that caught on fire. It was a small drum roaster. So it has the bean tumbler and just a stove heater at the bottom to roast the coffee. And when Zach purchased it and was putting it together, he asked me for just some help setting it up.
No idea what I was doing.
Because there were some electronics to hook up the thermocouples to measure temperature and everything. And once he said, "Can you help me with the thermocouples?" I said, "Wait, this is what I do. This is up my alley." So setting it up and putting it together, and that was the part that got me excited at first. And then once you start roasting coffee and seeing just the transformation of this raw green bean and into a product that you can control. You can control how it's roasted and how it tastes. That's what really got me excited about it. So there's definitely a learning curve of learning how to use a roaster, learning how to like set up, like make the settings just as you like it. And every green bean, like every coffee bean has its own characteristics, be it in terms of like how much water is in it, how big it is, how dense it is. And there's a lot of art and fine tuning in there of like what the roast is going to look like and how the roast is going to turn out. And it just made it so exciting. So there's always a bit of a curve there.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error. And then I think it's learning your roaster first and foremost, because every roaster does act a little bit different. So you have to kind of learn the little quirks of yours. And then you learn the bean, because obviously every bean is different. But I think the key is to learn the roaster first, because that will have the biggest impact on really what's going to be happening with your roast.
Sure. So now this is always a question for, I'm going to include myself in this, us coffee snobs or connoisseurs, depending on how you want to say it. And I own that term lovingly, personally, as there are multiple brewing implements downstairs. Are you, and maybe you have different opinions, light roast, medium roast, dark roast? What's your jam? Or does it depend on the bean?
I mean, I like light roasts because you embody most of the natural flavors of the coffee the lighter you roast. And when we're going to spend however much money on the best coffee we can find, we'd rather not roast it to a level where we're losing all the reasons why we bought it.
Sure.
But I mean, from my perspective, I think that's an entirely personal choice. If you like it dark, there's a reason why you like it dark, because maybe you like the more full-bodied flavor or a smoky flavor, and that's what you should do. And you should still get a good coffee bean even if you're roasting it dark, because there's a lot of imperfections in bad coffee that will show through when you brew it. So get what you like. That's always my recommendation. Try different things to figure out what you like, but don't ever feel like you have to like something because some snobby person like me is like, oh, we have to do it light.
Too funny. Denise, would you agree, or are you a middle of the road kind of gal? Which do you prefer?
I agree. A little bit depends on the coffee. So it's like usually I'm in the range of light to light medium. There are some that if it's roasted too light, it just feels too acidic for me. So roasting it just a little bit more kind of lessens that acidity and brings out a little bit more sweetness in the bean. So it is dependent on the bean. And when we roast, we do like some trials where we look at like different roast profiles, roasting it for different lengths of time at different levels, just to see where the balance of, like Zach said, like the full body versus the acidity and the sweetness, like how that's best balanced for a particular bean.
Got you. So you use different types of beans for different types of roasts and coffee and brewing methods. That's been really interesting for me to learn. My fiance has been a connoisseur of coffee for longer than I have, I will say. And when he wanted to get light roast coffee, even for our espresso machine, I was kind of confused because I like the dark, earthy, there's grains at the bottom of your cup, like the European espresso that I had become familiar with before we got our own machine. We have a very humble, entry-level machine, but we're very excited about it. I really like it a lot. But when he started doing light roast in the espresso maker, I will say I agree. It was less smoky, less earthy, but it was, I'm going to use the word tangy as I'm trying to think about that right now. But my word for tangy, I'm assuming, is what you mean by acidic. It was just, it was less mellow, but it was more flavorful at the same time. Kind of a weird trade-off. So that's been fun to explore that with him. We were stuck on the Bialetti for a while. Friends of ours gifted us a special edition Italy green and red Bialetti mocha pot, and that was our jam for a good year and a half. We still revisit that, but I think the espresso machine is really easy to just set it and forget it, and then not have to be awake and watch the bubbler and make sure you're not going to spill over. So that's always the Bialetti. Sorry.
The Violetti is nice. And I will
Yes.
say, it's like once you get over that hump and you, like just like you did and learn that a light roast espresso is just its own wonderful thing, it really just changes espresso forever.
Oh yeah.
It does. It
Hmm.
does. It's not, I'm going to say this again in a lovingly manner. It's not earthy, muddy coffee in a cup. It can have its own flavor profiles too. And I also like the earthy, muddy in a cup too. That makes me very happy. But yeah, it's interesting to play with. I love that. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your coffee beans a little bit, where you source them, because not only are you empowering women in your area in Arizona, but you are also very selective as far as the growers that you work with. And obviously we can't, always be going to other countries to explore the conditions and get to meet the people who are growing the coffee beans. How did you settle on who you were working with? How did you find them?
Yeah, so I mean, first, like when you're just starting out, you do you research the normal ways, Google of like, all right, where are the coffee? Who are the how do you
Need
get
good
coffee?
coffee.
Yeah, and so again, through our research, we found that there are certain importers of coffee, obviously, who they're the ones that have essentially established the relationships, have kind of quality control measures to ensure they're only importing the best coffee from around the world, and also they can have the direct relationships so they can tell you, all right, this is the story behind this farm, this is who runs it, their story, and they can ensure that their sustainable practices are taking place, they're environmentally conscious, they're promoting fair labor practices, all of which are very important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found a couple different importers who have very specific programs geared towards supporting women producers. And we establish a relationship with their sales reps, and they have warehouses in America, so you're getting it from a warehouse in the United States. But from that, we were able to say, okay, wow, this we found these amazing coffees that are located, in Colombia, in Guatemala, Ethiopia, and here's the story about what these women are doing to support their own community. And it's a fantastic story, and we're like, we want to be in business with these people. So basically, that's kind of how it works. You find the importer who will tell you, all right, here's the best coffees we have and the stories behind them. And then, then you make that decision and you place your order, and hope for the best.
I think the most important thing for us was knowing the entire supply chain that was going in there. Like, we want to know exactly, even just the women who are on the farm, like who's growing it, how are they treating their workers, how are they impacting their community, and are they getting, like, most importantly, maybe, are they getting paid a fair wage to do the work that they're doing? And that's what the importers are able to give us, like, so that we can establish that relationship and know, like, who are these people behind the coffee. And that's something that we appreciate, because it's important. Like, it's not just something that you buy on a shelf. Like, this is coming from a farm on the other side of the world, and if that farm, like, was not supported, and if it did not, like, have sustainable practices, there's not going to be coffee on the shelf. So it's so important to start on the farm and to make sure that that farm is supported.
Yeah, I mean, when we purchase coffee from some of these farms, it's not just, us purchasing the coffee. It's also investing in the farm to ensure it's sustainable long term. And the money that, they're getting from us through the importer is then reinvested back into the community. I think there was a study that showed that women-owned farms, the women who run them, actually do a better job of investing back in the community and supporting their own workers than farms that are owned by men. And so I think that was interesting, and so that's why we're so proud to support these farms and work with them, because it's exponential, that support, I think.
Sure. Now, have you been able to, or actually, first question, because I forgot to ask you in the beginning, with all of this hopping around, or no, just one hop from New York to Arizona and some job and career changes, when did Empower Coffee Roasters actually start? What year, what month? And maybe you had the garage, and then you had the incident, and then you moved into your current operating facility. What was your timeline with that?
So our timeline was a bit unfortunate in terms of the lockdowns that we've had all over the world. So we started selling coffee last April. So it's been just about 11 months now that we've been open. And I remember it was around this time last year, like about mid-March, when we were just gearing up and like planning programs for our shop and getting our coffees ready. And then everything shut down. And it was in like the last like few weeks of my MBA. And I remember going to class during the day, and then we'd go to our shop at night and just like we did like a paint project on the walls because we didn't know when we would even open. It's like, let's just take some time and like do something fun in the shop. So yeah, like we've been like we were able to open in April, like exclusively online, and then start to open to doing some local delivery, a little bit of in-person pickup.
Yeah, and we've been, very careful with COVID, obviously. Just for one, obviously it's the right thing to do. But also, there's certain things that, like, for our business to eventually grow and succeed, we need to do in person. And so we've been obviously a little bit behind because we can't have those in-person meetings and in-person events that we would like to. Mm-hmm. But we deliberately switched to a very online model and just been focusing on that. To kind of grow the business that way.
Got you. So you have not yet had the opportunity, but maybe will in the future, to go and visit the farms where your coffee is being grown. This is a situation where having a broker, having an importer per se, has been really especially beneficial to you guys because you can have a mostly direct relationship with whoever is growing the coffee beans without personally having been there yourself. So there's, I assume, a lot of trust between you and your importer. Do you go through the same importer, or are there a few different ones that you work with?
We have a couple based on our needs. There's some importers that are exclusive to one country. So we've used that for, when we want to source from there. And then others who kind of source from multiple countries. So we have a few, but they all have great reputations, and we trust them. Exactly. We trust them because, it's impractical for us to visit every farm that we want to work with. So we need to kind of rely on our importers for the time being, to kind of deliver a quality product.
And especially when you're starting out and you're a small company, that just the cost of going to a farm and even just importing a small amount of beans yourself is such a high cost that, like, starting at least, like, going through an importer, like, since they have an economy of scale where they can, like, bring some costs down and, like, pass that on to their customers, it's so helpful to start that way, that we have somebody that already has built these relationships, that has, negotiated prices and contracts and everything, and has done all of that work so that we can just buy beans and get started.
Yeah.
And then eventually growing into visiting farms.
And the logistics too, like we don't have to deal with tariffs and shipping containers and all that. Everything goes with that. We just don't have the capacity, having just started out, to do that. So the imports are. And also, I think a lot of roasters rightly promote when they are direct trade, where they have relationships, and it's great to have these personal relationships. But it's also important to note that, if you have an importer that you trust and has, proven themselves, there's no difference in quality of the coffee. Like a direct trade roaster isn't necessarily providing you better coffee than if you go through an importer.
Mm-hmm. As long as you trust the importer and know, because you still know exactly the farms that your beans are coming from. You just happen to have the importer. I would assume that would be, like you said, you don't have the tariffs and things like that, since technically you're getting it from the U.S. Tariffs have already been imposed to the importer. So that makes your life a heck of a lot easier. Also, I would assume to be cost effective, it's not like you'd want to order like 20 pounds of coffee beans directly from Guatemala and get them shipped to you. It's a lot easier for the importer to order 100 or however many their quantity is, and then divvy it up to the smaller roasters in the US. That's going to make a lot more sense, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
I would hope. I don't know. Maybe you're ordering 100 pounds bags of beans already, but that I would assume would be a lot.
Well, so each bag that one might order is about
isn't it like 70 kilos?
Yeah, 60 to 70 kilos. So yeah, you're talking about 150-ish pounds one bag.
Sure.
So, and a lot of the big roasters, they are getting
Like pallets.
huge pallets of it at a time. Like some are getting entire shipping containers in one time. We are not at that point. I think that would be a great day when we get to order our first, huge pallet and also save on the the wholesale pricing of it.
Sure.
I mean, that's, it's just funny, like for a company like ours, we are very much committed to things like sustainability and environmentally conscious choices. It is tough for us because we don't have the buying power to make that a lot of times financially feasible, and we want to, but we also we sell in a market where the customer, there is a limit to what they're willing to pay for a bag of coffee, and the margins are tough, so it's kind of for us finding that balance where we can of finding environmentally conscious companies to work with, obviously the farms, but also being able to sell it at a reasonable price.
Sure. It's a conversation that I had with actually our very, very, very first guest all the way back in September of last year, a semi-local roaster, local enough. He's about 40 minutes away from where I live, Brian at Ross Street Coffee Roasters. That's one thing that he said. In order to compete, and not that we need to foster competition, but just to have comparable pricing is really challenging compared to the grocery store coffee, and even perhaps the maybe organic or direct or specialty, what have you, whatever label that you're slapping on that. When you're dealing with a large scale roaster, like you said, that is maybe getting shipping containers of coffee beans, they're clearly able to offset their pricing because they're ordering in bulk. And when you're supporting a smaller coffee roaster, not only hopefully are you getting the superior quality, which you guys have, but also knowing that might just not be a possibility. Every roaster, every supplier, hopefully, unless you're just out there for the monies, which I know you guys aren't, you need to make sure that you're taken care of and you can do what you want to do with your business. But it's really, really cost prohibitive sometimes, just because it's not like you're going to order a shipping container right now. Maybe eventually, fingers crossed. Or do you want to scale up that much? That sounds like it would be a whole lot of investment and work, but who knows what'll happen in the future.
That's actually a really good point, Julia, because when you're starting out, you need to really prioritize where you're going to put investment and where you're going to spend money. And one thing that you mentioned is those labels of, can we put an organic label or fair trade or what Rainforest Alliance, whatever label that is on the bag. And a lot of times it's not just for us, but even for these farms, that just getting that label on a bag is so cost prohibitive. So that's something that we, one of the reasons so that we wanted some transparency in the supply chain, because even if you don't have that label, you can see what's happening on those farms, and that they're following organic practices, that they're sustainable and that they're taking care of their farms and their crops. So even though we don't always have that organic label on it, we know that it's organic. We know what they're doing on the farm. Yeah. So having that transparency, really, it just cuts costs for them and for us, and that we could pass on to the customer.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're.
I'm sorry, Julia.
No, go right ahead.
On the organic thing, we actually do get some of our coffee has a label of organic, but then there's things that we would need to do on our end that we just, unfortunately, our facilities can't, so we can't officially label it organic. But yeah, for anyone listening, our coffee is, is organic. It is, farmed, completely without chemicals and anything bad. So if you ever have any concerns, I know a lot of people, it's very important for them to, be able to know their coffee or any product they have is organic. And so they can rest assured with our stuff.
Sure. And you'd mentioned before, there's certain profiles that come out in specific coffee beans. And I have always wondered this, and I buy organic when possible and when not cost prohibitive, or buy local because I at least know that, my local new friends in Arizona roasters are going to be careful about where they're getting their beans from too. I do like to support small, and I find that small companies usually care about the people that they're getting their ingredients from too. Have you, being the coffee connoisseurs that you are, do you notice a difference between organic coffee and not organic coffee? Do the pesticides, do the fertilizers, do those come through at all? I'm curious.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean,
Hopefully
I can't say,
not,
Yeah.
but
I can't say definitively, but I've never noticed it. I think honestly, most of the differences in terms of like a coffee bean is the way it's processed, whether it's like dry or washed. I've never really noticed that the difference, which isn't to say there isn't. It's just
Sure.
probably someone smarter and more well versed than me could probably better answer that, but I've just never noticed it.
Right. I think like the bigger like problem with flavor is when you get into the larger coffee cartels that just grow low quality beans in bulk to sell. And that's when you need to do that really dark roast and dark profile so that you can just hide, I guess, the flavorlessness of those kinds of
Sure.
And the imperfections
Yeah.
too, like the bitterness and
So I think most of the difference comes from farming practices. Like, are you being sustainable? And so that could come into like whether or not you're organic as well. But are you taking care of the farm and are you taking care of the land so that you can grow a good quality bean?
Sure. And from my understanding, as far as organic and not having genetically modified things in it too, though raising an organic crop could yield less at the end, they're also going to be a hardier product. It's kind of an only the strong survive sort of situation, as far as I understand, where maybe there's not as much quantity, but you're going to have quality. You're going to have the plants that made it through anything that could have taken them down. They're the ones that survived, and that's your final product. You're not overstimulating a inferior plant that would not have otherwise made it, and then using that as a subpar, super genetically supported ingredient.
Right. And that's part of the tragedy of coffee as a commodity because we're so used to coffee being available all the time in high quantities at a very low price, but that's not a high quality bean.
Sure.
So as like customers, it seems like you and that we became over time once we learned more about coffee is it's the land that's used for coffee is so precious. And with climate change and the way that like land is just changing over time, the amount of good quality farming land is getting smaller year by year.
Sure.
And we need to really understand the value behind coffee, that if you're paying just a couple of dollars for a pound of coffee, that's not good. That you need to really invest in the people on the farm, invest so that they can take care of their crops and take care of their land. And that's going to come at a price. And maybe we're not drinking 20 cups of coffee like, throughout the day all of the time and just, massive amounts, but enjoying like a few cups and really valuing what that coffee is.
So my 3 cups of locally purchased fair trade coffee, I'm okay with 3, but maybe not 20. 20 is not, no one needs to be drinking 20 cups of coffee.
I couldn't do that.
How many cups of coffee do you two usually consume a day? Are you just the single morning quality cup, or do you have the afternoon coffee as well?
I have one in the morning. That's usually just my one to get me started during the day. If I have a long work day, then I'll have one in the afternoon too.
Yeah.
Sure.
And one in the morning, one around 1:00, and then maybe if I'm working out at night, I'll do one around 6 or so because I'd rather have coffee to kind of give me a boost of energy versus some other stuff.
Sure.
So yeah.
We're about right when we wake up. Matt usually he's a spoiled rotten man. I love him so much. He gets coffee delivered to him in bed in the morning, so he gets coffee before his feet even touch the floor. So whenever we wake up, and then usually like 10 or 11, and then 1 or 2. We have 3 before 3 p.m. So if there's ever a second coffee or a third coffee after 3 p.m., I might not be sleeping well that night, and I don't like to not sleep well. So my time cut off. If I had a coffee at 6, I don't know. It could be a rough following morning.
I'm weird. Like I could have coffee like at 9 or 10, and I could still sleep. That's I don't know
Matt
how.
both.
I can't do it. That's why I do like a morning cutoff because even in the afternoon, sometimes it's pushing it, but sometimes you just got to get through the day.
Sure. Oh gosh, I hear you. So do you have a preferred brewing method? You mentioned that there are several different types that you like, and depending on the bean, depending on the roast profile, what is your go-to method?
I think my go-to just on a day-to-day is usually a V60. So it's, just like a nice, like simple classic pour-over method.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, V60 is also because it's single serve for us, so that's why I think that's what we use mostly. I personally like the Chemex, which we normally do on the weekends when I'm making coffee for two.
Sure.
And I like it most because I don't think you can screw it up as much as you can screw up a V60. I mean, that's the thing about like brewing is that there's a lot of, you have to like a lot of trial and error with that too, and hopefully getting it right and like certain variables and parameters. And there's a million different ways to do a V60 or a Chemex, and it can get overwhelming. And I think sometimes I feel like while it's great for a hobbyist, I think sometimes that gets a little overwhelming for the more like typical consumer. And so I personally, whenever I'm trying to educate someone who's a little bit new to good coffee or the right way to do it, is I just focus on making sure your water is good and heated to the right temperature and using good coffee. And then however you want to brew it, just go for it, because I don't want to overwhelm them and make it like too much. It's not worth it. So, but yeah, there's the AeroPresses can be fun. The Kalita Wave is good. It's obviously similar to the V60. The French press, actually, some would argue, is actually the best way to get your best cup, because it's the immersion brewing actually gets the most flavors out. So French press again, that's a great way. And yeah, I mean, is there anything else we have?
Yeah. Well, for the holidays, I got you. It's a manual espresso.
Oh yeah, the manual espresso.
Ooh, fun!
That thing's cool.
Yeah, that one's really fun.
I'm awful at it though. Like I cannot do it.
Matt has been wanting to make a manual espresso. At that point, you call it a pump, not a machine, I think, the manual espresso maker. But his preferred is the AeroPress, and mine is probably the French press, if not crunched for time or in a little bit of a hurry. The espresso machine gets used first thing in the morning. I'm not awake yet. I can't concentrate. The pour over and Chemex are actually the two that pour over Chemex, and then a drip coffee maker are the three that we don't have. So the standard methods of brewing are the ones that we don't actually use. But I got my mother the V60 for Christmas because she wanted a fun way to brew her coffee. And I'm like, this is artistic enough. Like you said, can leave a little bit of room for error, but less complicated, less pieces, things like that. And she's been enjoying that quite a bit.
Exactly. So. That's why I like it in the mornings, because it's simple enough with a little bit more in it where I can just make a quick cup of coffee with the V60 in the morning.
Yeah. Yes. And it's people say about brewing coffee this way, it's like the ritual. And at first I kind of rolled my eyes at that expression. Like, let's not work, let's not make this more than it is. But I do kind of like that you get to just focus on it in the morning. All your attention is drawn to it, but you're blocking out everything else. And it is a little bit meditative to do it. So, and it's not like crazy difficult or time consuming. A lot of people think that they should just do the automatic dripper because it's the quickest thing to do. And it is, but it's not like making a manual pour over really is that labor or time, intensive.
Sure. I would have to agree. It might be the next thing that we do, but both of us are kind of at the point where if we're going to invest in something like that, we have a scale. We're going to get the kettle. We're going to get the kettle that measures the temperature. To do that, we're going to do that. We're not going to half that. So we'll see. I'll report back if we get more coffee implements. We'll see what happens. But
love to hear your input on that.
Yes. Oh, yes, most definitely. So tell me a little bit about the farms that your importers source your coffee beans from. The ones you have listed on your website, I would assume, are the ones that you use most frequently. Those are kind of your staples. And we have one from Colombia, Mexico, and Guatemala. And all are just a little bit different, and they have their own characteristics and their own highlights, which I thought was really interesting to read on your site.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, like the Colombian and the Mexican, they're like cooperatives. So it's like a bunch of different women farms coming together and forming this cooperative to kind of offer like, good prices and great coffee with the importers. Like it's a program that they're all kind of starting together, and it's built from the ground up. And they also have commitments to supporting the community because of the way it's structured. It's not necessarily just a single farmer and a woman farmer in Colombia. It's a group of farmers. So for the Colombian one, the Mexican one, that's kind of the distinction. In Guatemala, we have Patricia Perez, who's like this like old school, like, eighth generation coffee grower. And we're not the only one who uses her, which is great. You'd probably be surprised how many roasters you would find, her coffee farm, because she's great. She knows her stuff. She's just a good person who contributes to the community. She's built a reputation, and the importers that work with her love her, and they always promote her. But, so that's the relationship building. That's what kind of we're talking about. Is like, here's this woman who is just like is so great at what she does, and has built these relationships to the point now where she is a known name in the coffee scene here. So I think that's so cool, and I'm like, it's almost like okay, this sounds really like stupid, but we have a celebrity coffee farmer. We feel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if she's been in the game so long, clearly she's been doing something well or right, or clearly people still want to buy from her. And if it's going to be the better quality, better empowerment, better standards, sustainability, things like that, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, do you think she was always like that, or did she kind of develop different practices as sustainability started to gain a little steam? Or one would assume she saw that maybe her land quality was going down because of over-tilling or what have you. That could be a really deep question that I would need to ask her if I ever got to meet her. But
I mean, she's so busy and booked right now, so it'd be tough to get her. But
I think I'm probably not even going to try on that one. I'm just going to say that's not your game, Jules.
So, I mean, we can't speak specifically, but the way in coffee in general is because there are some, essentially the big boys in the same way there's your Starbucks, there's also the farms that are almost like the equivalent. The smaller roasters are getting squeezed, and so they have to actually adapt and figure out ways to kind of showcase their beans. Otherwise, they're going to die.
Sure.
So, yeah, farms like hers and the other ones, they are figuring out ways to, improve their production. And that also means being better with water conservation and, land use. All these things that kind of go into sustainability, because being sustainable is in their best interest, both for their farm survival, but also to sell, just to sell the beans and give kind of a reason for, roasters such as ourselves to want to work with them.
Sure.
So I think coffee in general is something where, you have to adapt and learn new methods. There's new methods coming out about the processing of coffee. It used to just be wash and dry, but there's the honey pulp. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. And so there's a lot of innovation, I think, that they are, the market's kind of requiring them to do.
Yet one more reason to support smaller, picky roasters is because you are also supporting smaller farms that are potentially getting squeezed out, which is going to cut down on the amount of jobs, especially with these female-owned operations and co-ops. You think about how much money that could bring into the community, that if those co-ops are all of a sudden just squeezed out, it's not only the families that are receiving payment for their coffee beans. I noticed this last summer just driving through smaller towns in Iowa, when there's not an industry, there's fewer curbs, fewer streetlights. Of course, here I am in, Iowa, and these are the things that I am seeing, but just resources and money to go back into the community, even when one business dissolves. That's, how much was their profit? How much is not going back into the other businesses in that community? One thing goes out, and then it's just going to be a snowball effect. You'd have to imagine. I mean, people adapt. That's what we do. That's what we have to do. But if we're not supporting the roasters that are getting those beans from those farms no longer have a purpose, which has a huge impact on those smaller communities too, where coffee and cacao farming that's what you do. Yeah. That's what's there. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah, exactly. And you hit the nail on the head that it's a universal problem that you need to support small businesses, not just in your own community, but around the world, so that we can have good infrastructure even, and so
Sure.
that, communities and people can thrive. And that's built on small business.
Now, on that topic of small business and being in your own community too, the second part of Empower, maybe it was the first. Did you originally decide you wanted to empower young girls in your area, or was it originally the desire to support female farms?
I think it went hand in hand
A little
a
bit of
little
both.
bit. Like it started locally, like with our desire to make an impact here, and just with like the opportunities that I had to volunteer. And I knew that there was like some kind of spark in me that wanted to do something more in the community, but I didn't really know how to make that impact. And once we
Sure.
found coffee, that's when it clicked that we said we could use this, like something that we love to do. It's something that we like to do together. Like we can build a business together and spend time together, but also it gives us an avenue to support our local community. And at the same time, we get to support coffee farmers around the world and women that are running coffee farms in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, when we started the business, and I think the empowering women through volunteering and getting like girls interested in STEM, that was the core. I think we knew we wanted to do that. And I think we quickly realized though that we can make our business essentially something that empowers women in every aspect. So yes, we donate money to local organizations that support girls and women. We have plans to kind of provide classes and educational opportunities to them too. But we also could easily source our beans from primarily women-owned farms. That's something we can easily do when we decide to do. Furthermore, we also try to work with women-owned businesses as our vendors. So we hired our graphic designer who got our labels going is a new woman-owned business. Our accountant, our lawyer are both women. These are things that we can easily do and kind of live our values in our business.
And those also, your website is so beautifully laid out, and you can tell that it's so important to you to highlight what you're doing and to honor these businesses that you're working with too on that page. By the way, guys, this is empowercoffeeroasters.com is where you can find not only their coffee, but the information behind this wonderful, wonderful roasting operation. You have all of those listed. You have your accountant listed. You have your label designer listed, as well as the coffee farms that you're supporting as well. And you have your community organizations that you're working with too. Could you tell me a little bit about those organizations? The three on the website were Live and Learn, Eve's Place, and Go with the Flow. What do these beautiful organizations do, and how are you able to support them?
So these are some incredible organizations that we found around the Valley. Our first organization we partnered with when we started was Go with the Flow, which is a local nonprofit in Arizona run by this amazing woman, Demetra Presley, who has the mission of ending period poverty, where she saw that there are students around the Valley in Phoenix that did not have access to menstrual supplies. And she made it her mission to stop that, because there's no reason. One of the biggest reasons around the world that women do not go to school is because of menstruation and because they don't have access to feminine hygiene products. And that's her mission, is to end that in whatever way she can, starting in Arizona. So we started working with her when we started out, and it was an amazing experience, enlightening for both of us, and just so fulfilling. We also supported Eve's Place, which helps victims of domestic violence around the community. And then after Eve's Place, for a while, we've been working with Live and Learn Arizona, which also partners with Go with the Flow in some aspects too, which is really cool to see. But Live and Learn has the mission of ending generational poverty in Arizona, and they help women get into school and get into university to have an education where they can make that next step into the workplace and into a better future.
Yeah. And Live and Learn, just in particular, we found to be very like compatible with our mission of empowering. Like they, very similar, even like verbiage in their website of what they are empowering women too. That's their goal as well. And a lot of us do education. So a lot of the girls that they kind of mentor are girls who would have definitely fallen through the cracks just purely based on the circumstances that they were born into. But they're committed to getting them, exposed to science, exposed to financial literacy, get them into college and get them through college so that they are now someone who can get a good paying job and then support their family and rise up through generational poverty. So that's very close to what our goal is with our with the charitable stuff we would like to do. So Live and Learn has been in particular a really great partner that we've been actually had more of an extended partnership with, and we recently launched our new initiative to donate school supplies for every bag sold, because that's
wonderful.
That's a very big need. Is basic school supplies like notebooks and pens is they don't have, and it's tough to learn when you don't even have anything to write with. So we're really proud about that one, and I think that's a partnership will always be ongoing.
Yeah, and our original plan when we were starting this business was to hold events where we would have, I guess, like after school, like STEM events for students around the area, or even like work with like some places to hold in-person workshops. But because of the pandemic, that all just stopped in its tracks. So we had to repivot when we started the business and made it like part of our mission that we donate 5% of sales to these organizations. And that's just our baseline across the board. And now that we are able to open up and do a little bit more, we're expanding and like starting with donating school supplies. And then we're going to we're going to have the opportunity coming up to start to maybe have those types of events and to do more in-person interaction now.
Yeah, and cool. Also getting girls interested in terms of like types of jobs. Like obviously that's a big thing what we're going to do with STEM jobs, and also though coffee. I think a lot of people when they're going to school, they also need to support themselves while they're in school, and they need a flexible job that will pay them enough where they can kind of have their living expenses covered. And a lot of times you get into your basic entry level, like sometimes fast food or Walmart, and they're not known for having great labor practices, flexible schedules. Coffee, even like working at a cafe, actually can be a good job for them because they're flexible schedules. You make pretty decent money for what it is, and you kind of network with a bunch of different people from different backgrounds, and that networking will pay off in the future. So I always encourage people when they're looking for some type of job just to kind of get their foot in the door. Coffee is a great place to go.
Sure. I'll say one of my favorite places to go. There's a couple around town now, but the original. Actually they were there before. I don't think we have one Starbucks and one Caribou technically. I live in a location where like Cedar Falls and Waterloo, Iowa are like Minneapolis, St. Paul for my fellow Midwesters, or there's no line. There's not even a cornfield between the divide. It's one road right into the other. So technically in Cedar Falls we have one Starbucks, one Caribou, and then three locally owned coffee shops, one of which, four, two of which do their own roasting as I'm counting and adding. Well, some of them have popped up in the past year or two, and I have my standard. I have my cup of joe down there on Main Street. I just have my standard, and it's so true. Growing up here, and going to that coffee shop since I can remember, since I started drinking coffee, the baristas there and even the owner several have become friends. They recognize me when I walk in. Like that networking, you just cannot replace that. And being in something like that, not necessarily just, at a restaurant, but really specific to a coffee shop too. You get to know people's orders. You get to know where they're going, where their job is. Did they walk? Did they bike? Did they drive their car? Take public transportation? I've never thought about that before. There's a level of connection that you have there at a coffee shop that you don't get other places.
Yeah.
Maybe at a bar, but that's not usually the best supportive environment to be in, especially for a younger person. They don't need to be there. So,
No, and I remember that too growing up. Like, when I was in high school, we wouldn't go to bars or anything like that. But
sure. I didn't either.
yeah, it's like we go to the cafe because like where are you supposed to hang out, and just like, sit down and, talk with your friends and everything. And that was the cafe.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. After orchestra concerts, after choir concerts, things like that. Yes, so I would drink coffee at 8 or 9 p.m. on a school night. I don't know how I did that. I was younger then, only 31. But yep, that's what we did. We went to Cup of Joe after any school activity, and that's just what you did. I love that. Now I want to. I was just there yesterday, but maybe I'll go down this afternoon too. I'll break my post 3 p.m. coffee rule. Well, this has been so much fun to have you guys on and just get to chat with you as people and coffee lovers, connoisseurs. We're not snobs. It's okay. We're open to all coffee possibilities. And just get to hear about Empower and your mission, both locally and abroad, and how you're incorporating that into every facet of your business. And it sounds like we've definitely not reached full potential yet because of the pandemic and having to kind of shift the way you're doing things. But I'm excited to see once you can do the in-person tastings and the in-person STEM education and events and things like that, how this just explodes, because you guys are just wonderful. I'm excited.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you, Julia.
We are pretty awesome.
I think you're pretty awesome. Well, you've even been to Des Moines on one of your work trips. You shared with me pre-call. You have been to Zombie Burger, Iowa people. He knows Zombie Burger. That's a big deal.
I am one of you all now.
Yeah. One of us. I don't know if you want to claim us all the time, but we'll take you guys. We'll take you both. So remind us where we can find you. That website was empowercoffeeroasters.com. And then are you in some local places around Arizona as well? We're working on that still.
Working on that. And most of our kind of, we have some pending business in some offices, so obviously that's not really open to the public. Sure. And we've done some one-offs, but I think that's what we'd love to. So if you want to see us in your neighborhood retail location, please let the owners of the said places check us out. We would love to get into some more retail places and spread the word about what we're all about. So
yep, and
the wholesale tab is on there.
Yeah, we ship all over the U.S., so no matter where you are, we can get coffee to you if you're interested in trying it out.
Yeah.
And like you said, that's empowercoffeeroasters.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook, too, at Empower Coffee Roasters.
Yeah.
Glorious. Thanks so much, guys. This has been... Yes, of course. Most definitely. This has been Denise and Zach of Empower Coffee Roasters, empowering women locally, with STEM education and inspiration, and abroad with female-owned and operated coffee farms. You can find us at the.ethical.consumer on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook, iTunes, YouTubes, all of the places. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time.